Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for the next stage of my playthrough of the Coral Sea scenario from the Fires of Midway. Now, at the end of last turn, the Shoho, the Japanese light carrier, had launched a pretty successful strike on the US fleet. They'd inflicted some torpedo hits on the Lexington, and even though the Japanese squadron was decimated, at least its torpedo bombers were, this does represent a major success for them. So now we come to the turn of the US carrier Yorktown. And the US Navy has got some rather difficult choices to make because, on the one hand, they're very conscious that once the Yorktown has her turn, the Zuikaku will go next and then the Shokaku. So that's a fairly formidable collection of power. And the big question for Yorktown is, does she want to try and knock out one of these Japanese carriers before they can get their strike off? That would be the preferable outcome. Or should they pick on the more distant Shoho? Now, herein lies part of the US problem. As we know, the US aircraft have not quite got the same range as their Japanese counterparts. And the problem they have is that given that Zuikaku and Shokaku are hiding behind the low clouds, that's going to make any strike the US player makes at a range of 1, 2, 3, 4 because their positions haven't been fixed. And the US player is not at all sanguine about the notion that well, for one, there's a giant cat in the way. Hello, Oscar. You come to offer me some battlefield advice. Yes, he's not at all sanguine about the fact that his planes will have the range to get there and arrive in good shape. Shoho, by contrast, is out in the open and is significantly closer as well as representing a weaker target. Now, she is temporarily out of things because the loss of her torpedo planes during the attack has it's basically pulled her teeth. Hello, Oscar. But there is a mechanism in the game by which aircraft that are in the watery grave can, to a limited degree, be recovered for further use. I think it represents repair crews patching up damaged aircraft and managing to throw together something of an air group given enough time and opportunity. So depending on how the battle pans out, there is a very real possibility that Shoho might regain her offensive powers. So what to do? Go for the light carrier that's already has had its turn, but which may be an easier target, or attempt to knock out one of the bigger ones. It is a bit of a tough choice. I think as the US player, although I recognize there are problems with this approach, Yorktown will commit her strike, which, according to her card, is only 3 aircraft cards anyway. She will attempt to take Shoho out of the equation. Hopefully it will turn into a bunch of free victory points and give the US a lead, as well as pairing off an annoying, if tiny, part of the Japanese task force. After that, the US player will probably have to use their admiral's actions to stock up their cap and hope for the best. So, right, the Yorktown is going to turn into the wind and is going to send a wildcat, because you always want to send a fighter with your force. They're going to take a chance and send one of the bombing squadron Dauntlesses, as opposed to the scout squadron Dauntlesses, which, as you can see, have a smaller bomb load in exchange for a longer fuel endurance. In fact, because Fletcher is desperate and he's not bound by his doctrine, he doesn't need to send out the Devastator torpedo bombers on what, let's face it, would probably be a suicide mission for them. So although it might seem a bit like overkill, they're going to send the entirety of the bombing force, escorted by wildcats, against the Shoho. The other enticing thought is that Shoho, unlike Shokaku, doesn't have a cap in the air, and if the Japanese fail their spotting role, then so much the better. So, first of all, let's gauge the distance. From the US task force to Shoho, it's 1, 2, 3. Of course, Shoho is now flipped for the purposes of future attacks, unless she moves. So we need to draw some fuel cards. The US starts closing fast. This is good. And then they have a headwind. And then they have another closing fast. Well, that is just beautiful. So amazingly, all of the US aircraft arrived on their happy side. This is good. So, next question. Are the Japanese going to spot them? They get one dice and they need a 3 or less. So this is going to be 50-50. No, Shoho does not see them coming. So that is very bad news for the Japanese carrier. And that is because it means she has absolutely no defense against what's coming. I'm just going to bring her card down here so we can all see what's going on a bit better. So, much to their deep joy, the Wildcats have nothing to do. And Dauntless Squadron A is going to make the most of this beautiful, beautiful target below them. Poor Shoho. Now, the US player does want to make sure of their mark, but given that Shoho's been so obliging, they're not going to commit an overly powerful support card, but they will put something down, because you do, like I say, you want to make sure of your mark. The somewhat desperate Shoho is also going to commit something to the action. Sorry, my camera's having a bit of a wobbly. Let me just try and bring it a bit closer. There we go. Right. Yeah, I'll put that down to turbulence as the aircraft made their approach. So the cards are revealed. And the US player rather aptly has played sitting duck. The Shoho is having none of this, and her close escorts are going to join in to help her out. So it's 2 Japanese dice versus 4 US. I think Shoho will have to get lucky to get out of this one. And, ooh, dropped a dice, sorry. Dropped a dice again. And I'm afraid poor Shoho's luck has run out. The US just beat her dice roll. So that card goes away. So does that one. And I just need to scrabble around on the floor. 1 second. And so that group of Dauntlesses is about to roll a 6 dice attack against the poor Shoho. And even worse, because they won the roll, they get to choose which target matrix they use, and they'll definitely be hitting on 4s, 5s, and 6s. Thank you very much. Gosh, if we'd known Japanese luck was going to be this bad, we'd have gone after Shokaku and Zuikaku instead. Never mind. Okay, so the bombers go screaming down. It is 50-50 because 3 of the 6 bombs land in the water. But I'm afraid that's 2 4s and a 5. So luckily for Shoho, none of those are critical hits. But she gets treated to 3 fire counters. Now, if it's possible to do so, fire counters do have to be grouped into inferno counters. So I'm afraid 2 of them do turn into an inferno, which is not very useful for the Japanese carrier. And her troubles are not yet over, of course, because no sooner has one group of US bombers departed, another set is coming in. Sorry, just need to scrabble for some cards. 1 moment. Terrible. You think you organise things, and then at the height of a battle, nothing is where you thought you put it. There we go, wasting precious seconds on the bombing run while I try and sort myself out. found my cards. I was trying very hard to pick up my discarded cards and wondering why I'd seen them all before. So yes, just to beef this group up, the US is playing a card as well, and the increasingly desperate Shoho is going to carry on trying to defend herself. Reveal cards. Oh dear, Dick Best is on the case, it seems. However, Shoho, even in her what may be her death throes, is allowed to draw 2 cards. So the fleet may lose her, but her resistance is benefiting them by beefing up their hand. So we are looking at 5 US dice against 2 Japanese. Shoho's going to really need a lucky break, I think. And she simply doesn't get it. She rolls absolutely beautiful. If the highest US roll had been a 5, she would have got away with it, but sadly she doesn't. Good effort, but quite literally no dice. And just to make life worse, with that bonus bomb hit, this bomber is going to roll 7 hits, 7 dice when the time comes. So that card goes away. And once again, the US player has a choice of target matrix. Oh yes, they're definitely going for that one. So they make their roll. Okay, incredibly, more than half the US bombs go in the drink, so Shoho's still putting up a blinder of a fight. But because that's such effective bombing, it's 2 more fires and a straight up critical hit Inferno. So 2 more ordinary fires means they get one of those. That turns into an Inferno. And poor Shoho gets yet another Inferno straight away, and her bulkhead moves to cracked. So that was absolutely nasty. And just to make life even more unbearable for the Japanese, because none of the US planes suffered any significant damage in this engagement, they all returned to the Yorktown safely. Talk about adding insult to injury. And so that's the end of the phase. I'll put the poor beaten up Shoho back in her formation. And now any carriers on combat air patrol that are smoking must land. At the moment, it's only Yorktown's cap, so they have to bring those fighters down. Meanwhile, Shokaku's cap fighter goes from fresh to smoking. And so now it's the Admiral's action. Again, Takagi, yes, noted about the spelling. It's very annoying. He has, again, a bit of a decision to make. He's... although he cannot allow a carrier to give a save the ship order, he's not completely heartless, and he is going to try and help the Shoho a bit. So he's got 3 repair points he can use. So he is going to order Shoho to try and carry out what repairs she can. And what 3 repair points allow the Japanese to do is get rid of 1 Inferno card and 1 of those fire cards. So Shoho is still in trouble, but it's not looking quite as hideous as it was a moment ago. And what of the US? Now, they've got some interesting decisions to make too. Fletcher can make the same choices. He can get Lexington to get rid of that leak, although she can't sort out her bulkhead damage just yet. He could also look at refilling his hand, but the US still has a pretty decent hand of cards. Their ships still can't defend themselves, but they've got good offensive cards for the bombers, and they've got good dogfighting cards for the fighters. But there's also the pressing question of the cap. At the moment, he hasn't got one, and the Japanese are about to come roaring in to exact a tiny bit of vengeance. So he is going to order the Yorktown to put up a fresh cap over the fleet and hope that it proves sufficient, because the Japanese are sure to come a-knocking. And so that is the end of Yorktown's turn. And we move over to Zuikaku. Now, unsurprisingly, the Japanese are extremely cross at what's happened. So Zuikaku is going to go into the wind and launch 3 aircraft. They're going to send an obligatory 0. Let's make this a balanced strike force. They're going to send some Vals, and they're going to send some Kates. So a little bit of everything. And the range to the US fleet is 1, 2, 3. So checking out the range, they've got a headwind, got another headwind, and a third headwind. But you know what? Doesn't bother them in the least. Those lovely long-range aircraft that they have. So unfortunately, the US have to go straight to their spotting roll. Oops. Dropped a dice again. And unluckily for the US, they do not spot this incoming Japanese strike. So the whole burden of the defense is going to rest on Yorktown's Wildcats with no help from Lexington's. And just to make things a teeny bit worse, the Japanese get to choose, of course. So the Zeros are going to engage the Wildcat in combat. And they're going to try extremely hard to get rid of them altogether. So both sides choose their cards. Now, the US pilots wanted to pace themselves a bit and save their good cards for worthier targets. But with the Japanese reveal, that proves to have been a bit of a mistake. The Japanese are really out for vengeance now. And 6 dice against 3 US is going to be a tricky one for that Wildcat. Let's see what happens. Oh, no, no escape. So the Japanese line up their shot, and they got 4 dice altogether, 3 bullet icons with another one. Oh dear, that was nasty. So the 6 takes the Wildcat out of circulation. So not the best strategy on my part to try and hold back on some of my good combat cards, because it's just cost me a load of Wildcats. And of course the Zeros have done their job, so that leaves the bombers free to do their thing. Now they're more than conscious, given what happened to poor Shoho, that the Yorktown has already had her turn, so it makes far more sense to focus on the damaged Lexington. The other consideration, of course, is Lexington is going to be getting a turn in a short while, so it makes more sense to reduce her options, shall we say. So the Vals peel off first, heading for the target. They're going to play their card. The US will respond, but given my previous comments, we all know this is just for show. And they are, of course, bluffing. Question is, are the Japanese bluffing? Ooh, no, they are not. Okay. Vals come boring in. 3 dice to the American 2. Oh my goodness, and they fluff it. That amazing US good fortune has come back, so the Lexington's gunners are not going to complain about the poor Japanese approach angle. They're going to go for it. Magnificent shooting from the US carrier. They have absolutely decimated that incoming Japanese squadron. Keep it up, boys. Make sure there's more lead in the air than there are oxygen molecules. But of course, we're up against the Imperial Japanese Navy, so completely undeterred, the Kates come in to have their turn. In fact, if anything, they're angry enough to really want to press this home now. So they play their card. I won't bother repeating my stunt with the US carrier because we all know what I'm going to do. So let's just get this over with. And ooh, these guys really mean it. So 4 dice on 2. I'm not really liking those odds. Let's see if we can survive this. Ah, no. We did well against the dive bombers, but I'm afraid the Kates had other ideas. They don't really have much of a decent choice with regards to the torpedo hits, so they're just going to go for it. They get 4 dice and they need 1s and 2s. This is where I pray they continue rolling high. And they did, they obliged. So most of the torpedoes miss. But unfortunately for the poor old Lexington, who really is in trouble now, another torpedo slams into the ship, causing a massive flood, and more importantly, rupturing more of the bulkheads. So we're going to have to do something about that, otherwise we are in serious trouble. And with that, the Japanese turn away. Not the most satisfying outcome for them. Those losses they suffered were pretty unfortunate. But they've done very well. They ripped apart my combat air patrol. Although I suppose it's only small consolation because they lost all their dive bombers trying to do it. But that brings the Zuikaku's turn to a close. The Japanese now, of course, have to land the Shokaku's cap. So nobody has a combat air patrol up at the moment. Admiral's actions. Takagi, what are you going to do? He has a bit of an awful choice now. He wants to follow up with a strike from Shokaku against the US ships. But he's painfully conscious that A, his hand is pitifully weak now, and B, poor old Shoho up there is still on fire. So what is he going to do? Well, I think in these circumstances, if I were Takagi, I would rely on the skill of my pilots to hopefully pull off a bit of a victory without too many of these, and focus the efforts on trying to save Shoho. So that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to order repairs to Shoho. He is aware that there is going to be another US attack, possibly from the Lexington, but he's hoping that because the ship is so badly damaged, the US might order a save the ship action. If there's any chance of doing so. I mean, she is quite badly knocked about by those torpedo hits. But yes, he will endeavor to save Shoho. So her crew battle on against the flames and manage to get rid of another Inferno counter. Meanwhile, on the other side of the metaphorical pond, Fletcher still thinks he's got enough good cards to make a good fist of this. So what he is going to do is he does desperately need to help poor Lexington out. He's going to have to take a chance on the combat air patrol reacting to an incoming Japanese strike, but he is going to order Lexington to contain her flooding. So Lexington does that. And that is the end of that particular round. So it's going to be the Shokaku next, and then the Lexington after that. But I think partly to maintain the suspense and partly because I'm afraid I didn't think to charge my phone properly before I embarked on this one. So to avoid us being unceremoniously cut off mid-recording, I am going to call it there, and we shall complete Shokaku and then Lexington's turn when I come back in the next video. So again, I hope you guys have enjoyed that little exchange. It certainly was very dramatic, with the US giving the poor Shoho a battering, and then Zuikaku's attempts to come and even the score by hitting Lexington again and not quite making it. So things are still extremely tense. I mean, overall, I think the Japanese still have the US Navy on a bit of a back foot, because one US carrier has had its turn. And the Lexington still has a powerful air wing, but she really needs to look to her own physical state, because if she doesn't do something about that damage, particularly her bulkhead damage, she is going to end this round crippled, and that is going to be giving the Japanese some victory points, as well as leaving the US in a very iffy position indeed. So the decisions for both sides are going to be... I'll say they're a little more straightforward for the Japanese. Shokaku is just going to throw her strike in and hope to do more damage. Lexington is the one that's going to have the very, very difficult decision to make, and a lot will depend on how things stand when it finally is her turn. But I will leave that there for now and just say a huge thank you to all of you for continuing to follow this series. Hope you're enjoying it as much as I'm continuing to enjoy it myself. As always, to my veterans, a huge hello and a thank you very much. As ever, it's really splendid to have your company on these little adventures. Thank you so much. And thank you all again for all the comments. I am actually going to sit down tonight before I upload this video and start answering some of you, because you've been really awesome about getting your thoughts and questions and so forth down, and it's about time I got to the radio room and started doing something on my side of things. If you're new to my channel, if this is the first of my videos you're watching, you're very, very welcome indeed. I hope you enjoyed this one. If it's this game in particular, the Fires of Midway, then that brought you here, then please do have a look at the other videos I've made and the ones that I'm going to be uploading in the near future. And if it's wargaming in general, feel free to have a meander around the channel. You're more than welcome. I hope you find something else that you like. But whoever you are, wherever you're watching from, as always, much appreciation, guys. And I really look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Take care. Bye.